Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Bengal Tiger Podcast. I'm Matthew Brune, and joining me once again is Shea Dixon. Shea, we have a bunch of colors on the screen right now: purple background, orange shirt, blue shirt. For those listening at home, just all of the colors you can imagine are on the screen.
A bright Monday morning to you and an On3 green cap, which
Yes.
is my favorite of the group. Keep it on straight there. Good weekend, Matty B. I know you were a bit under the weather, but we'll talk. This is a football usually heavy podcast in terms of mailbag, but
Yeah.
we are allowing a couple basketball questions in here just because things heated up over the weekend, both on the men's and the women's side with games. We'll get into that in a minute. Before we start the mailbag pod, I wanted to touch on this because I found it interesting. We're in the time of year where mock drafts are really kicking up, and mock drafts are never perfect, but they do at least give you some insight into what some of the top or most respected names in that industry are saying, because a lot of what they get are from teams, scouts, GMs, who met front office people, and they sort of organize out their predictions from there. Well, we've seen a lot of round one mock drafts. Now, ESPN today has dropped a round two mock draft, and I'll pull it up here. This was something that stood out to me because for the first time, I think it's realistic at least, since the 2018 class, that LSU will not have had a first rounder or may not have had a first rounder. In 2019, they had one in Devin White at linebacker. 2020, they had what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with Burrow and Jefferson and Chason and Queen and Edwards-Helaire. In 2021, Jamar went in the first round. A year ago, Derek Stingley goes as high as 3. And even before that 2018 season, in 2017 draft, I should say, Fournette went 4 overall. Jamal Adams went 6. Tre'Davious White, one of the best corners in the league and an all-pro, went in the first round. So since 2017, only one time has LSU gone without a first rounder. I'm looking at the latest ESPN mock draft, and there is not only not a first rounder, BJ Ojulari comes off in the second round in this prediction to the Rams early on, edge rusher, priority position. Kayshon Boutte is not on it at all. So there's at least some people out there that are saying that they would not have Kayshon Boutte as not only a first rounder, but not even a second rounder. Now, simultaneously, I'll give you this. I've pulled up the breakdown from all of the ESPN guys and where they have the receivers ranked. None of them have Kayshon Boutte in their top 5. Are we looking at a situation? We'll debate or at least talk about the first rounder thing in a second. Is there a real chance Kayshon is not a top 60 pick, doesn't go in the first 2 rounds?
I mean, we had this conversation kind of about him going in the first round earlier. The dynamic changes completely when looking at the second round, because first round, I can agree with those, ESPN and most people, when doing a top 5 receivers list, you're going to have the guys like Quentin Johnson, Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Josh Downs, just bringing them off right now, Jalen Hyatt even to a degree. Second round is where you get to names like Rashee Rice from SMU, who was very productive at SMU, but I saw him and I've seen Kayshon at his peak. I think Kayshon is better at his peak. Then you get into some other, really there's not a ton of receivers in the second round. You go Jaden Reed from Michigan State. And I even have up an SB Nation one that's, I think, aggregated as well. So the second round, it's like it feels top heavy in a way, where you get those top 6, and then after that it's either Rashee Rice or Kayshon, or you don't have many other options.
Yeah.
And
So the breakdown they have here in today's ESPN mock draft, you can find it on their site, obviously. Round 1 and round 2 both have 4 receivers in it. They put 4 receivers in round 1, 4 more in round 2. That speaks to this sort of divide you're talking about. But it goes Jordan Addison out of Southern Cal, Jackson Smith and Jigba out of Ohio State, who missed all but 3 games. I mean, Kayshon's injury is playing a a role, at least in this conversation. I think his medicals at the NFL draft will be
Yeah.
something that people are watching because he didn't look the same after his injury. But Jackson Smith-Njigba at Ohio State is a first-round guy they're predicting. Quentin Johnson out of TCU. Jalen Hyatt is a late-round flyer out of Tennessee. And then in the second round, Zay Flowers, Boston College, Josh Downs, UNC, Rashee Rice, SMU, guys you mentioned. Then they went Tyler Scott out of Cincinnati. No Boutte. So I do think that you're right. I think that it plays into that reality of, okay, at this point, it looks like he may not be a first rounder. So it's going to take a team falling in love with him in the second round more than they like some of these other guys that we mentioned.
And receiver is starting to turn into, well, I would say 2 or 3 years ago it did this, but it turned into kind of a premier position to where teams are willing to take a chance on receiver higher. And I know it's kind of always been that way where we've seen guys with great speed go in round one that maybe weren't proven, but with the emergence of the receiver position in the NFL, where you see, the Eagles get Devontae Smith and AJ Brown, and the whole game opens up for a quarterback like Jalen Hurts. Like you go down the list of the Vikings, a bunch of teams that have average to slightly above average quarterback play, that just the offense opens up when you have receivers. Teams like I'm looking at a mock draft now, like they have Green Bay taking Quentin Johnson. Like you just make life easier on whoever the quarterback is, Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love. Same thing with the Seahawks, right? If the Seahawks get Jordan Addison and you compare him with DK Metcalf, so on and so forth. So that's why it is increasingly getting more top heavy to where these first round guys are like, if you want a receiver, you go and get a receiver early. And that's why like the second round is really like kind of, I don't want to say leftovers, but it is a little bit more of like, okay, we can be more selective. Like if we're not in love with this guy, we're not going to take a chance on him here. And Kayshon, while again, like I said, his highs, his peaks, I think obviously warrant a top 15 pick. This past year, he tried playing through that injury a little bit more. He tried getting back to 100%, and what he showed on the field was not good enough to be a first round pick. Like that's the reality of it, and he's going to have to make up for that by performing incredibly well at the pro day, combine, wherever he tests.
Here is what I will tell you will maybe save the streak. Keep the streak alive is not Kayshon. It's BJ Ojulari, because edge rusher, outside linebacker, however you want to peg it into whatever defense he would go, is a premium position. And there is no doubt that Will Anderson is considered the elite edge rusher in this draft out of Alabama. He will go as one of the top picks in the draft. But when I look at where they are ranking these outside linebacker edge rusher guys, Mel Kiper doesn't have BJ in his top 5. McShay has BJ 5th. Then you get into guys like Reed, who has BJ 2nd. Matt Miller has BJ 3rd. So it will be interesting. And that's Jordan Reed at ESPN. Some varying opinions there, but the thought is he's anywhere from right after Will Anderson and ahead of Nolan Smith and guys to behind that top group and maybe 3rd, 4th, 5th. That could equate to an early second round, late first round pick. So it's BJ Ojulari who's the one who has a chance to keep this streak alive. And I'll also say this, in high school, BJ Ojulari tested very well. He was a 40-inch vert guy. He could run fast in the 40. Just the things that they'll do at the combine, he'll do well at, and he'll interview well. So I could see teams knowing, hey, look, his brother came in the league, had a lot of success early on as a second round pick. This is a guy that could potentially be a late first rounder. I'm really excited to see what the next couple of months look like for BJ, because I think he's got a chance to continue to move his stock up more than where it already is.
Yeah, and he is in a situation where the scheme will matter as far as where, the defensive coordinators that are looking at him and the head coaches that are looking at him. So I think ideally you'd like him as an outside linebacker type in a 3-4 type situation where you have him utilize his speed to where he's not hand in the dirt type. I don't think at the next level. Not saying he's not capable of that, but I think ideally I'd want him as an outside linebacker, which that could work in his favor. It could not work in his favor, but I think you might be looking at a little bit more of a select pool of teams to where instead of 32 teams, I think maybe it's cut down to like 22 teams, let's say, that I think where he could fit in their scheme. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe he can do both at an incredibly high level. I just think after watching him for 2 years, I would like him more as an outside linebacker type. I mean, he did at LSU, right? He was at the Jack, which was technically an outside linebacker position. So I think that's where he can really excel at the next level. But yeah, you're right. It's you do get a lot of varying opinions. Just when I've scrolled through them and I've looked through a bunch of different experts, rank and talk about the edges in this draft. BJ is as physically impressive, I think, as anybody here.
So that's the gist of it. Those are the two guys that are going to probably get picked first for LSU, barring some big drop, like we said, for a guy like Kayshon. But Kayshon being looked at as a second rounder at tops at best right now, at least in the eyes of some. BJ potentially late first round guy. We will keep an eye on it. The draft obviously is still a few months away.